Hello and welcome to this video on why it is that iodine is commonly used as a frontline treatment for radiation poisoning. Let's start by debunking the idea that it is just iodine. No, you are not taking what would otherwise be elemental iodine. It is normally given as a form of potassium iodide. The key thing about this formulation is that it does not have radioactive iodine at all. This version of iodine is otherwise called iodine 127. That is why it may be prescribed or advised. This is why it is used, and under certain circumstances, radioactive iodine can be released into the atmosphere, and also into water. Most often it is due to accidents relating to nuclear power plants or similar. The release of iodine into the water and air, which is radioactive, release of an iodine form called iodine 131. This is radioactive and therefore harmful. In short, the version given for treatment replaces the role of the radioactive version of iodine and therefore prevents you from getting as sick. But the importance here is that's the simplified version. The longer version is that with all cases of radiation, it is a matter of where and how you are exposed. In the case of air and water, it will end up inside your body. When that happens, you have a much bigger issue than when radiation tries to penetrate from outside your body inwards. The problem is that the radiation spreading outwards from inside your body has a much greater effect. That is because you have far less protection from it, and you have no real control over the dose. You pretty much get all of it right away. Both forms of potassium iodide, both the type given as treatment and the type given as a radioactive compound, whether intentionally or not, are the same elements. The difference is the isotopes that make them up. One being radioactive and one not, and that is the major difference between them that is important. Both kinds of iodine that are given can be absorbed by the same organ which is the primary recipient of iodine, that is your thyroid. The iodine given as a treatment for radiation poisoning is primarily intended to protect it, which is why it's either given shortly before or just after exposure to radioactive substances, but primarily iodine. This does one thing and one thing only. It fills up the thyroid with its maximum amount of iodine that is not radioactive. This means that any other radioactive iodine that passes through afterwards is not going to get taken up and therefore not going to damage the thyroid. If you give your body enough iodine before you get radioactive iodine into your body will not give it to the thyroid as a result, and it will just pass through and keep on going and then be excreted. Unlike most treatments you might think of, potassium iodine does not give 100% protection, and that's largely due to the relatively narrow window of time where you can take it and have a positive effect. You either need to take it before exposure or shortly after. If you take it beforehand, your thyroid, as mentioned, will be protected because it absorbs most of it and no room for radioactive iodine, or during, in which case you reduce the exposure to radioactive iodine at the thyroid. Of course, if you have a ridiculous amount of it in your body, because, for example, your water has been contaminated and nobody knows, you're going to have a lot more trouble because you now have a huge dose. Generally, potassium iodide will only be given to people under 40, and they'll try to avoid those who have known issues with iodine. There are also those who have issues around their thyroid. This again relates to the limited protection and specific circumstances under which it is used. It's noteworthy that if you're not going to be exposed to radioactive iodine, this will do nothing for you as it doesn't provide any protection, remembering it only really targets the thyroid and protects it. There are 24 hours before and 4 hours after exposure in which it will work, and it's certainly not a way to reverse any damage that has occurred. Most of the times in which you would be exposed to radiation, you're going to find that iodine is not the issue, and this is why iodine would not be a proper or appropriate treatment for exposure in those cases. To no doubt rile up the preppers and similar, potassium iodide can be harmful if used outside of these circumstances, largely because you don't necessarily need much iodine to support your health, and most of the time, salt is already fortified with it, so you'll find that you don't actually need extra to be added as a supplement. This is why it's generally only ever used when prescribed or advised by public health officials or a doctor. If you are taking it regularly, without need, it can cause other issues. Most notably, there are going to be things like allergic reactions, stomach upset, possibly inflammation of your intestinal system and salivary glands, and in extreme cases there can be development of thyroid issues. The biggest problems are going to be in infants who have this, and they're going to develop hypothyroidism, or that's an underactive thyroid. You can find that if you take excessive amounts, as with most things in life, it will also kill you. There are also those who think that taking iodine as a precautionary measure is a great idea. This is also a dumb idea, and it's dumb for a very simple reason. The thyroid can only store iodine for so long. This is why you had 24 hours before and 4 hours after exposure to radiation in which it may work, and specifically for radioactive iodine. This is also why taking it as a prophylaxis is relatively pointless. You're simply taking extra iodine for nothing, which can cause the aforementioned side effects. There's also another issue, and the most common example of this is going to be places like Germany. In Germany, it was for a certain time used as a supplement, leading to thyroid issues, but because this was older individuals, it led to hyperactive thyroid or overactive thyroids, and these cause issues to do with your heart, your body, and metabolism, as the thyroid also plays a big role in regulating metabolism. Because the supplements were taken, partly due to fear of the Soviet bloc, this led to a lot of people developing issues with their metabolism derived from their thyroid being, well, poked and prodded by the supplement being taken on a regular basis. Hopefully this has explained just why it is that iodine is given in the case of radiation poisoning, and specifically with regards to air and water that's likely to have radioactive iodine released, rather than other kinds of radiation exposure. For example, a nuclear blast from a bomb. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions below.